You are from a range of different countries and from a range of backgrounds: teachers, civil servants, students, pedagogues, consultants, researchers, and all of you, a heartfelt welcome. Well, I'll say just a little bit about this webinar, but otherwise we'll just get into it. The aim of this webinar series that is financed by the Nordic Welfare Center, thank you very much, NWC, is to complement existing and long-running Nordic initiatives within as well as outside the Nordic Welfare Center, with a particular focus on highly specialized services and service needs. An aim is also to facilitate sharing of knowledge and experiences concerning disability research and practice at both national, regional, and municipal levels. And finally, to integrate perspectives of users of disability services, practitioners within services for people with disabilities, as well as researchers. That's it. So today's webinar is about universal design from vision to practice in everyday life in the Nordic countries. We have asked 3 distinguished scholar practitioners, Kirsti, Camilla, and Per-Olof, to prepare talks within this topic. They've chosen their own focus and angle on the topic, and some of you may be familiar with the work that they've done, but we're really thrilled to put them, the 3 of them, together in this event. I won't make an introduction to them. Go to the web and search for their work. I'm sure so many of you will do that. The speakers each have about 20 minutes each, and that's about it. We have text translators at the ready, I should say also. So in the background, you won't see them, but they are there and very active. Lars and Maja Noah are doing text translation along the way, so you can select that if you want that option. And also, if you have any difficulties, technical difficulties, you should write to my colleague, Carsten Wolf, who is sitting in the background also. A few practicalities. You don't have access to speak while you're here, so just keep it muted, but you're welcome to use the chat function at leisure, just out here on the side. I've also already put in some links to previous webinars, and you're welcome to share information about an upcoming event that you think would be interesting to the attendees here. So go ahead and use that. You can also put a question to the speakers if you like. That would be interesting. I'll try to pick up on it at the end, but you can't be sure to sort of have your question answered and you don't get to present it yourself. That's for expediency sake that we do it this way. Okay, so we try to stick to the program. The program is that I should stop speaking now, and Kirsti will start speaking just now. So welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you for your introduction. I'll try to share my presentation. Let's see if it works. Do you see my presentation? And to see when notes, I should go to this one, right? Okay. We'll see how it goes. My name is Kirsti Svine, and I work as a senior advisor at VIVE.DK, which is the Directorate for Child, Youth, and Family Services, but also has some other responsibilities, which I will get to. So I will talk a little bit about our experiences and visions in local and national policies to transform universal design into practice in Norway from a Norwegian perspective. I am not a scholar. I'm a bureaucrat at this directorate, but hopefully it will be interesting either way. So this is the agenda for today. First, I will talk a little bit about our role as the directorate responsible for equality and non-discrimination, as well as the other stuff I mentioned. Then I will talk a little bit about universal design in the Norwegian context, and then some on organizational framework, and I will finish with the government action plan on universal design. So, VIVE.DK. VIVE.DK is, as I mentioned, our main tasks are regarding child and youth and family services, but we are also the government agency responsible for equality and non-discrimination. On the topic of equality and non-discrimination, we answer to the Ministry of Culture and Equality. And we work sector-wide and are tasked to convey knowledge and analysis on the development of equality and discrimination regarding both gender, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and so on. We also work to achieve the government's goal of a universally designed society, which is what I will talk about today. So, in Norway, we see universal design as a prerequisite for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, let's see if I cannot see my notes. Do we have some tech support for that? What should I click on to see my notes? Thought I could. Disappeared for me. Okay. Well, I will go by hand then. Okay. Well, in Norway, we see it as a prerequisite for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, if you are to leave no one behind, which is a statement that is connected to the 2030 agenda, we need universal design, for example, for all people to achieve quality in education, which is goal number 4, which is also a prerequisite for acquiring decent work and economic growth, which is goal number 8. And that in turn is needed for achieving goal number 1, no poverty, and goal number 11, sustainable city and communities, and so on. So it is all connected and obviously also necessary to achieve our obligations in CRPD. So in Norway, these are the 2 main definitions that we use. The one to the right is from CRPD, Article 2, and the one to the left is a definition in the Norwegian Equality and Anti-Discrimination Act from 2018. The one to the left states that universal design means designing or accommodating the main solution with respect to the physical conditions, such that the general function of the undertaking can be used by as many people as possible, regardless of disability. Now, this is my translation, so I apologize for any bad wording. And the one to the right is from CRPD. Universal design means the design of products, environments, programs, and services to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. We can see that both of them are have several similarities. For example, both address all people or as many people as possible. Universal design should incorporate as many as possible. We also see that both definitions try to avoid stigmatizing solutions. We see it to the left where we talk about universal designing the main solution, and the one to the right, CRPD, we see that universal design should be done without the need of adaptation or specialized design. So we want to avoid to have solutions that are secondary for some people. There are also a couple of differences here. we see, for example, that CRPD includes services which are not included in the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Acts, which mainly focus on physical conditions and ICT. Also, the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Act is limited to the general function of the undertaking, which is mainly the part of the agency that is open to the public. Who are responsible for ensuring universal design in Norway? Well, article or paragraph number 19 in the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Act states that all public agencies shall work actively and targeted to advance universal design within the agency. And the same goes for private agencies aimed at the general public. So, for example, VIVE.DK, who is responsible for child welfare institutions, should work actively and targeted to advance universal design within our child welfare institutions, which is why we've started a project on that this year, for example. And private agencies aimed at the public could be, for example, restaurants or stores or private schools and so on. However, there are no requirements to report on how you do this on a yearly basis. But the requirement is to work actively and targeted at all times. Now, there are also some limits or restriction to the requirements to universal design in Norway. For example, it is stated that the obligation for universal design is considered fulfilled if the agency meets the requirements for universal design laid down in law and regulation. Now, it looks pretty technical, but what it means that if, for example, you meet the requirement that a threshold should not be this and this high, or a door should be this and this wide, it is considered that you met the requirement for universal design. And you could end up with a situation which I've tried to illustrate in the picture to the right, where we see a very long ramp with 10 plus twists and turns, which surely meets the requirements in terms of how steep it is. And it has something to hold on to, and it might meet the requirements, but it could be discussed if this is universal design. And there are also some limits in terms of the burden that is laid upon the agency. For example, if it is very expensive to meet the requirements for universal design, or it goes on accord with safety measures or historical considerations, then you could also be exempt. So what does this mean for our daily work on universal design? In the Plan and Building Act, the term universal design is used in two different ways, both as a principle that is incorporated by the entire law, but also as a material requirements, how many centimeters, how steep, how wide, and so on. And material requirements within the building regulations are minimal requirements for universal design. And we should work both with universal design as a principle at all times, and at the same time meet these minimal requirements. The goal is equality and participation for all. Universal design is not the goal, but it is a tool to meet the goal. It is a iterative process that requires continuous work and re-evaluation. I often incorporate a statement from a scholar from Canada called J. Timothy Dolmage. And he instead said that universal design should always be a verb and never a noun. It's something that we do and not something that is, because it could always be argued that someone are still left outside or does not feel that this universally designed something meets their needs. And then you could end up with a situation of melancholic universalism, where it becomes even harder to create a society for everyone, because what is universally designed is, well, I can get lost in this. I will continue. I see my time is running by. So a little on the organizational framework in Norway. Equality work in Norway is a cross-sectoral endeavor. We have something called the sector principle, which means that all the sectors and sector authorities are responsible for equality and accessibility within their own field. So the sector of transport is responsible for ensuring universal design within their sector, and building within their sector, and ICT within their sector, and so on. We also have a strong local governance in Norway, a two-tier system of local government with municipalities at the small local level, and then county authorities, and then state authorities on top. We have also seen that it has been more decentralization in the latter years, and more responsibilities given to the local governments. Now, there are clear boundaries for how much the state governments or county authorities can intervene with the municipal systems, for examples, which means that in order to achieve universal design, we need all sectors at all levels to work in the same direction always. Now, here is an example within the sector of transportation. We have the Ministry of Transportation at state top, and then you have the Norwegian Road Directorate, which is responsible for roads at the state level, and the Norwegian Railway Directorate, which is responsible for railways at the state level. And then you have the county municipalities on the road side, for example, which is responsible for public transportation and county roads, and the municipalities, which is responsible for municipal road. So it's an example of how responsibility is divided in Norway. When it comes to the cross-sectoral endeavor, it is the Ministry of Culture and Equality, which is responsible for the policy areas of equality and discrimination, and VIVE.DK, who is responsible for coordinating the government efforts within equality and universal design. And our department, the department that I work in, organizes our daily work, tasks, and efforts on universal design. Now, these are our main tasks on equality and universal design. We coordinate the government action plan. We work on developing and sharing knowledge on equality and universal design, for example, financing and initiating research, surveys, statistics, analysis, and etc. We cooperate, organize networks, and engaging user participation, dialogue, presentations, organizing conferences, seminars, etc. We also allocate grants to organizations that work on universal design in an innovative way, or who work to spread knowledge on universal design. Now, I want to state the importance of cooperation and user involvement when working on this, because VIVE.DK does not have a huge carrot, and we also don't have a huge stick. So we need knowledge and we need cooperation when using universal design, and that means dialogue and involvement of interest organizations. For example, this helps us to enhance our own legitimacy. It provides us with important knowledge, and it also ensures that our efforts are in tune with the needs of those who perhaps benefits the most from our work on universal design. We also need to have continuous dialogue with local and regional stakeholders. So we have regular contact with the county governors. We also have regular contact with municipal interest organizations. For example, the Norwegian Association of Local and Regional Authorities, where all county authorities are members, and most of the municipal authorities are members as well. We also have developed new guidelines for the municipal councils for persons with disability. This is something that all municipal authorities in Norway are required to have, this kind of council. Now, lastly, I just want to mention the Government Action Plan on Universal Design, which is perhaps the most important document in Norway for our work on universal design. The latest action plan for universal design was launched August 16 in 2021. However, we had an election that same fall and a new government, and it took a year after that for the plan to come into action, because the new government had to decide if this was something that they wanted to keep. Action plan contains over 60 measures from 8 different ministries. Now, there have been some switching of the type of ministries after the new government, but still. The process when developing this action plan was first to welcome input and involvement. There were conferences, meetings, and consultations. We received over 300 suggestions for measures in the action plans, and about 60 were kept. We also had evaluations of previous action plans, and especially the action plan that came right before this one. This is the 4th one. The Ministry of Culture and Equality is responsible for coordinating the action plan with support from us in VIVE.DK. Now, to the right, you see the 10 different ministries of state that signed the action plan. It's 10 and not 8, because some ministries have several ministers. The goal of the action plan is equity, equality, and sustainability. It states that the goal is a universally designed society. Now, as I talked a little bit about it, it is difficult to say that that is a plausible goal, but I read it as a goal of a society where everyone can participate on equal terms. Universal design is seen as a strategy that ensures a sustainable and equal society. And in the action plan, it is stated that universal design is something that's good for all and necessary for some. And it creates simpler, safer, and more comfortable environments for all. And this is also something that we in VIVE.DK are tasked to inform all the different sectors of. Now, that was my last slide. So I'm just going to say thank you for your attention. And I did not have my notes, so I hope it went well either way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsti, for this sort of view from the state level and out, how to implement policy, how to design policy. So now we move the perspective a bit to Camilla. We'll talk about some experiences and visions also about universal design, whether as a verb or a noun. So welcome, Camilla. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kirsti, for doing that without notes. I'm impressed. So let me see if I can figure this out. Yes. Thank you very much for the invitation. I've been looking forward to this because somehow we are very alike in the sort of Nordic region. And then when it comes to universal design, there are also many little differences that I think is important to highlight and share, and also learn from each other. I think we sort of historically learn and inspire each other very much, and I see a lot of overlaps from Kirsti's presentation to the Danish context, and then some quite significant differences also. I'm going to take you through just sort of the Danish situation or status on how we work with universal design. And first, I have to say I come from a private foundation. It's one of the oldest in Denmark. We celebrated 150 years last year, and we work to facilitate a more equal and independent life for people with disabilities. And sadly to say, the task is the same now as it was 150 years ago. So there is a need for us. But in the process of this, we've, let me see if I can figure this out. You can see my screen, right? There you go. We have in our foundation adopted universal design as a strategic tool in order to work to meet the vision that we work for, to create a more independent and equal life for people with disabilities. And in the process of this, we've established our universal design hub, of which I'm sort of the daily leader. We've established this foundation in order to facilitate and disseminate a multidisciplinary take on research and knowledge about universal design. We focus in our strategic work in the foundation also very much on education and research. And our primary activities in the hub is to facilitate an interdisciplinary research network in order to start growing and building an interdisciplinary knowledge field on universal design. And we've also established the VIVE.DK scholarship program in order to disseminate and grow an interest and meet an interest among students and lecturers at Danish universities. So we've just launched the VIVE.DK scholarship program last year, but that also has a focus on universal design and the interpretation of universal design in a multidisciplinary take across all universities in Denmark. So that's the core of our work and focus in the VIVE.DK Foundation. I think it's important to state that the universal design very much opposed to the Norwegian setting. In Denmark, universal design is still a fairly unknown term. It's been going through a huge change, or sort of a growing interest and knowledge about the concept in the Danish context within the last very few years. So for many years, while the term was growing and developed in the Norwegian setting, it was unused in the Danish context. This has turned out to be a huge potential within the Danish context, but it is to be considered a fairly new and an unused, or still sort of untested concept within the Danish context, because we've always tended to talk about accessibility. And when we talk about accessibility in the Danish context, we talked about accessibility for people with disabilities. And we've written the term and concept into most of our legislation and also our building requirements, for instance, and we've defined it as minimum requirements. So when we talk about accessibility within the Danish context, what we really truly mean mostly is minimum requirements based on legislation and also in practice specialized solutions, special solutions for a special user group, and often whether it is legislation or a pedagogic program or a building, it's often practiced in reality as a parallel solution to the main solution. Regardless of intentions, it's often experienced as stigmatizing or exposing, and maybe so because it's based on a minority understanding of who the users are. So this is sort of the status and the culture of designing our society to also include people with disabilities in the Danish context. And in this context, universal design is new. So in our foundation, we've held on, or we sort of latched on to universal design because of both because of how it was unknown, but also because of and mostly because the understanding of what it means to be human that it represents. This idea that the thing we do share as human beings is our ever-changing and different abilities throughout a lifetime. That it is the one thing we have in common. So universal design, as Ron Mays originally defined it, dissolves the idea of them and us, with or without a disability, and leaves us with that there is only an us, that it is something that matters and relates to all of us, as he also states in this quote from one of his last speeches. So in the VIVE.DK Foundation and the work that we do in the Danish context, we have an offset in the original intention and value that the original understanding of universal design sort of represents. What it means to be human. That to be human, it means that we are all living with these different abilities, that there is no them and us. And this is how we see the concept in the Danish context. And this is also how it represents a basic and very different understanding of who the users are than the way that we practice accessibility. And we also use the concept of universal design in order to not only discuss solutions or approaches, but also as a conversation starter, as a way of actually discussing and discovering our individual and common blind spots. What do we actually understand when we talk about abilities or disabilities? How do we understand it? How do we talk about it? How do we design it and define it? And the same goes to this whole idea of intersectionality. Can universal design also be a tool for us to have very different conversations than the ones that we're having whenever we talk about accessibility, that we open up this understanding and investigations of what it means to be human and who we understand as users. In the Danish context, we all often see the term all being used, designing for all, or solutions for all, or everyone, something that should be welcoming for all. But who do we really mean when we talk about all? So we also use and understand universal design as a term as this conversation opener. And because it's across all abilities and all ages and all identities, it's also relevant across all sectors of the lives that we live. And in the Danish context, also because it is so new, it actually holds this incredible potential to actually change our culture in the way that we design our society, the way we talk about what it means to be human, and maybe even bring about, if not a new view of being human, then at least a new conversation, a new language, a new approach to what it really means to be human, and to challenge our blind spots. So because it also is relevant in our understanding across all sectors, we also see it as an interdisciplinary tool, and this is how we also approach it in our foundation. We see it as a means to talk about abilities as much as disabilities, and to talk about stimulating the abilities that are, and not only compensate for the disabilities or the lack of abilities, and also talk about the way we experience society, build environment, education, social life, etc., as much as whether the functionality is high or not. So one doesn't leave out the other. They're not opposing to each other, but universal design gives us a whole new scene or stage to actually talk about these things in the Danish context, because it's new. And we interpret universal design in this very broad way in order to actually accommodate for this huge diversity in user needs and abilities. So we say that diversity in user needs require diversity in solution. And hence there is also not always only one solution that is the universal design solution, but it's very often a catalog of solution that is in place. And as we in the foundation is representative in many ways of the rest of the country, we also have lots of our own blind spots, and we challenge them all the time in everything that we do and everything we get involved with. But an example of how we can understand this take on what is a universal design solution. Is it one solution for all, or is it sometimes a catalog of solutions? What we did recently, or sort of in September, when we were part of a huge event in one of the public spaces in Copenhagen, we had stages, we had lots of discussions and debates, and as you can see in the picture to the left, we had different sort of seating options. You could sit close by or far away from the stage. There was microphones. There were teleslynge, can't remember the English word for it right now, I apologize. And there were also sign language interpreters. But then we also had these headphones that you see in the front of the pictures on the left side, so that you could, as an extra solution, or as part of the catalog of solutions on how to participate in the event, you could grab a set of headphones, and then you could walk away from the area, like these two ladies in the other pictures. They sort of put on the headphones, they walked away to a more quiet place where they could be, there were more space, but then they could still listen in on the debate that was taking place on stage. So to us, this is one example of how we interpret universal design as a catalog of solutions, so that you can be part of the event, you can listen in on the conversation, you can have access to the democratic conversation that's taken place, but there are many ways of accessing this. So for us, this is an example of how we can interpret universal design. As Kirsti also talked about from the Norwegian context, what we've also done here in the Danish setting is that we've latched on to the UN Sustainability Development Goals and the sort of the basic principles and pledge to leave no one behind on the sustainable journey. This has until recently been a fairly unknown pledge in the Danish context, but it's growing in recognition and knowledge, and we see it more and more often. And we see this as almost the key aspect of the SDGs, that we pledge that no one will be left behind, and that the furthest behind will be reached first. And when we look at the situation for people with disabilities in Denmark, the figures aren't very positive. We have to sort of face the fact that people with disabilities are left behind in Denmark. They're not the only minority group, but they are extensively left behind across all sectors of lived life. It comes to education, health, access to the workforce, the labor market, public transportation, housing, healthcare institutions, social life, cultural events, and so forth and so forth. So in this setting, we also have a strong focus on this situation from the foundation side, that we are leaving people with disabilities behind in the Danish context. And we see universal design as a tool, as a means to actually do something about this. And we also lean, of course, on the CRPD and the CRPD's interpretation and definition of universal design, and how it's expanded from the original MACE definition to include programs and services. In other words, it includes all aspects of the lives that we live. So in order to actually design our society so that it is inclusive and dignified, but also so that it actually meets the pledge that we've done by ratifying the CRPD, we believe that we need to understand universal design as a means, as a tool to both increase and design an inclusive society, but also to meet the pledge to leave no one behind. And in order to do so, we need to do it interdisciplinary, because the challenges and the issues and the complexity of a daily life lived is requires the complexity of an interdisciplinary answer. So this is why we focus on the interdisciplinary understanding and use of universal design in the foundation. And we also see universal design as being having the potential to be practiced both as an overall value-based concept, but also as something that you can integrate in your process, as well as discuss it as a solution. One doesn't sort of overrule the other. It's possible to talk about universal design as a tool in all of these different levels. But it's important to work with universal design across all scales and all sectors. This is why we work with these 4 different concepts, and we see them sort of very closely linked and interrelated to each other. But basically, and most importantly, we see universal design as having a potential to talk about inclusion in a whole different way than we've done so far in the Danish context. Thank you. I think that was all. That was my last slide.
Thank you very much, Camilla. That was a wonderful presentation and a wonderful model to finish up at the end. I think many of us will be actually trying to copy that and use it in other contexts as well. You pointed to some blind spots, and also to a focus on how people are present, not only having access. And those are some of the terms that require us to look at it from at what it requires from us, what we see together and what we do together, and that's about culture also, and that's something Per-Olof is going to talk about just now. So Per-Olof, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is P.O. Hedvall, and I work at Lund University in Sweden. And I work at the Department of Design Sciences, where I lead a research group called CERTEC. And what we do at CERTEC is that we work on questions relating to participation, inclusion, disability, in connection to design and technology in different ways. I call this presentation Universal Design, a Shift in Culture. And in the presentation, I will start with a personal story to introduce Universal Design, and then discuss Universal Design as a shift in culture, present some thoughts on Universal Design in Sweden, discuss Universal Design as a shift in categorization, and briefly introduce and discuss third generation, what we've called third generation Universal Design, non-inclusive design. But I wanted to start with a personal story. I've been using a wheelchair for more than 30 years now. And this photograph is from outside of a hotel entrance. It's you can see the pavement. There's a red carpet leading up to 2 steps to get into a hotel. This is from a Swedish city. I'm invited to be part of a day on participation. And it's 08:26 in the morning. I'm standing outside and wondering, so how will I get in since I use a wheelchair? And there's no information about how to get in. So after a couple of minutes, I have to ask someone passing by if they can go in and ask on my behalf. And they do so, and then the staff tells that, well, there's a separate entrance. It's around the corner. It's locked, but we can go and unlock it. And they unlock it, and I get in, and I participate during the day. But it's a weird start on a day that should be about participation. Being singled out, put in a vulnerable situation, having to ask someone, go in and ask on my behalf, etc. And when I got home, I looked up this hotel building and when it was built. And it was built in 1907. And the way people thought about each other back then is way different from the way we regard each other today. And for me, this is just one example in a long string of examples on how everything that humans create becomes part of culture, part of its zeitgeist, its spirits of the day, and that when we do something, we embed values into it, such as attitudes, expectations, and norms. And if you take a lifespan perspective, in a life, there are so much of society and society's design that we encounter throughout life. But when we are born, there's a lot that we haven't encountered yet. Here is a girl leaning out of a train car, and when she was born, much of society was unknown to her. But as she grows up, she sort of rubs against society, and in that process, she grows into society, but in that process, society also grows into her. And design is an integral part of this rubbing. I see design as something that is not just something external to us. It is something that shapes who we can be. The story is about who we can be. Who can you be? Who can you become? What stories about you does society support? And for me, this is where universal design comes in. To support the many overlapping stories about what it means to be human, to put in Camilla's words. Here is a model that I borrowed from a colleague, Anders Varell. He puts 5 circles on top of each other. And when we work traditionally with accessibility, we often focus on tools and methods. But those tools and methods are part of processes. And those processes are part of and affected by the mindset. And the mindsets, they are affected by the outer ring culture. And I believe when we work with universal design, we need to we need to be aware of all 5 and work deliberately with all 5 of these aspects, not just tools and methods, but also on culture and mindset. So I'm going to just a few words on universal design in Sweden. Where are we now? Well, since 5-6 years, we have policies based on universal design as a guiding principle in place, both on national and regional levels. But that's universal design as a guiding principle, not the material requirements, but just as a guiding principle. But the adoption of universal design is gradually improving in Sweden, with an ongoing shift in mindset and culture. And we are still learning a lot about how to work based on universal design. And looking ahead, I think that we need the terms accessibility, usability, and universal design, all 3 of them, as they go hand in hand. On the screen now, there's a bubble. It says accessibility. And with accessibility, it's a measurable concept that is used in Swedish legislation right now, where it's relating to access. But in Swedish regulations, we also have usability, which traditionally at least has to do with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. And with that, to that, we now add a 3rd bubble. So now on the screen now, there are 3 bubbles. Universal design, which is focused on equity, equality, non-stigmatization, and intersectionality. And the difference between the way universal design is conceptualized in Sweden is that in Sweden, it's not a measurable concept, while accessibility and usability both are measurable concepts, which makes them suitable to use in guidelines and regulations. Universal design is not, in Sweden, a measurable concept. It's a guiding principle. And that has caused some confusion that I think it's, we are slowly getting past that. But when, say 10 years ago, when universal design was starting to grow in Sweden as a concept, people starting to replace accessibility with universal design. But then they sort of lost their grip, because then they replaced a measurable concept with a not measurable concept. And that was, of course, that didn't lead anywhere well. So I think that we need all 3 of these, since they are ingredients of a whole that all relates to different conditions for participation. In our research right now, we are working on universal design and categorization. And the reason why we work on categorization is that, rather than category, is to emphasize that when we categorize someone, it is an active process. So it's done to someone, by someone, as opposed to already existing outside of social relations. And categorizations, they value certain perspectives and silences others, while giving advantages to some and disadvantages to others. But it's often being done in an invisible way. But multiple categorizations are always potentially possible. So we work on questions such as, how do categorizations operate? What do categorizations create? Who is understood to be part of everyone? On the screen right now, there's a toilet sign where I highlighted the line between a woman and a man. And that's the kind of questions that we ask. That line between man and woman, what does that create, that separation? In that work, we have started to pick up sense of something that we've chosen to call non-inclusive design. So on the screen now, there are 3 bubbles, The one to the left says barrier-free design. That's the first generation of universal design, where people worked with barrier-free design, primarily targeted at people with disabilities. Inclusive design, that's where we are right now. That's the second generation, where all is the intended target group, but it still carries an inside and an outside. Inclusion is a concept that comes with a power structure. Someone defines what it means to be included, and then includes a person or a group in that the included. So the inclusive design often requires a categorization of persons, bodies, roles, etc. So what we've started to see signs of is a third generation. It's still universal design, but it's a facet of universal design that perhaps is less developed at the moment. We call it non-inclusive design. With non-inclusive design, we mean design that deliberately stays away from categorizing bodies, roles, and people. So it's design processes that builds on something else than just categorizations of people. So a couple of examples of what we mean, and the patterns that we've started to see. In a number of projects now, 3-4 projects, we've asked people to send us photographs from situations where they feel singled out or included or excluded, and many of them have been on toilet doors. I think that's quite interesting, since, well, I love toilet doors. They say so much about the way people think. And on the screen now, there are 2 photos of toilet doors. To the left, there's a photograph of a toilet door with 3 pictograms: a person in a wheelchair, a family consisting of a man, woman, and child, and then a standing man changing diapers on a baby. So that's 3 different kinds of categorizations of persons and bodies. To the right, there's a pictogram with just a water closet and with 2 handrails. So that pictogram chooses that tells something else. It doesn't say something about who is this for. What does that person have to look like? It tells something else. It tells about function instead of person. So we've chosen to call that pattern from person to function. Another example is a pattern that we call from norm and deviation to variation. On the screen now, there are 2 photographs. To the left, there's a photograph taken from the outside of a cafe, and there's a slight difference in height to get in, say about 15 centimeters, and they've solved that with a very large ramp and a step to get in. And that, what you can't see in the photograph right now is that there are plenty of space outside. So they could have worked with the paving instead. But when I saw that photo the first time, I felt that, okay, so here's a pattern that is recurring. It's a pattern of the imagined normal person, and then the ones deviating from that. And that norm and deviation, that thought pattern, is embedded in this environment. To the right, there's a bench with a bench where you can sit in a number of ways. There are some parts with backrests, some without. There are openings to approach if you're a parent with a pram, or if you're using a walker or something. So we call that pattern from norm and deviation to variation. And this is my slide, my last slide. I wanted to include it since I often use it when I introduce universal design to our design students. It's a photograph from a subway station in London with a flurry of people and services and products all mingling together. And above the photograph, it says, with technology and design, we can celebrate that there are many ways of being in the world. So I have some contact details and some references for what I presented. So thanks a lot for listening. And I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Per-Olof. That was very, very interesting on its own. And together with these two other presentations, it was just absolutely wonderful. I think you caught on some many aspects of what we're talking about. Lots of good examples, both and perspectives from the state, from the private sector, from the ground. This was really interesting. I invite you now in a row to respond to the other presentations. What were the things that most struck you from the two other presentations, or what did they make you think of, or things you want to comment on that you didn't get to say in your own presentation? So Kirsti, will you be first off the bat, and then we'll go on to Camilla and Per-Olof. Thank you.
Yes, I thought it was interesting how even if universal design is not used in the legal framework as it is in Norway, how similar we thought still, both in Denmark and Sweden. I thought that was very interesting. And I also thought it was very interesting what you presented now, Per-Olof, about not inviting types of people, but just presenting, this is what we have. If that suits you, then you're welcome. But have you met with, or are you anticipating any sort of backlashes with that type of twisting point of view when working on universal design?
Currently we have a 4-year research project that where we work together with 4 municipalities and the topic for that project is equality. So it was in our search for equality and what supports equality that we started to see things that a new kind of science, for instance, appearing with that stays away from telling about people. The backlash, yes. I can see, for instance, let's say that you want to stay away from using the traditional sign with a person on a wheelchair on it, because that's a typical categorization of a person. There's a learning and a trust connected to that. So what happens if we removed all the wheelchair signs? Then that would perhaps create a new problems, a new vague situations that you have to work with in a new way. Then maybe with lighting, sensory experiences, other ways of depicting and supporting flow. So that would be one. I still think that there are situations where we will have to use the wheelchair sign, but currently I think that they just come up because we've put that kind of symbol on since 1969. So it's and to some extent it's also part of the current guidelines that there should be a wheelchair sign. So there are pros and cons, but it's something there's something happening, and where we can see. I have a photograph of a toilet door with 5 pictograms in a row, and how long, how many pictograms can you actually fit on the toilet door before it's, and still there's someone feels outside of all those categorizations. So categorizing people has a tendency to break down, or be at least insufficient.
Thank you very much. Camilla, do you have any thoughts on the other two presentations, or anything you want to comment upon from them?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts. I really enjoyed both of them. I think the mixture of the three, in my point of view, actually also shows how complex, or sort of how can we understand universal design, and also emphasizes how we need each other. Because I've worked also in Norway for 20 plus years. I've been sort of following that process there, and often both envious and a little sort of curious about this. What would the result be of the strategic approach and the visionary approach from the sort of top down from the government being translated into legislation and requirements, and something very measurable? Can universal design be measured in that sense? And then Per-Olof comes with all these questions in his research and tries to answer that. So that's kind of my takeaway right now, is this how we sort of supplement each other in something that is not easy, but we need to keep sort of generating these research approaches to what are consequences, what are the potentials and the positive outcomes of practicing universal design as something measurable in a sort of standardized building requirement approach, and what happens when we don't. And that's one of the things that we are challenged by every day in our foundation, is that everyone, or most people, believe in the value and the potential that universal design represents in a Danish context. But how do we practice it? How do we actually interpret it? What does it mean? Can it be measured? Is it possible? So I think just that the three different presentations opens up for this sort of diversity also of understandings of what universal design is actually capable of, and how there isn't just one interpretation of it. And I would also state, maybe it's easy for me, but I don't necessarily think that was the intention from Mays originally. But the concept has grown. It's a dynamic concept, and it is interpreted differently in different geographical and cultural contexts. And I think that makes it really interesting. So I'm very fascinated about hearing the two other presentations, because it speaks right into some of my own questions and not necessarily doubts, but just wonders, I would say.
Thank you. I think we have a question in the chat, which is also something that occurred to me a bit on the way, but it's better expressed in the chat function by Louise. She writes, "I'm curious, following this variation theme that you've all three struck upon, or was very much present in Per-Olof's presentation, how could we effectively in practice design for it without operating with categories? Even segmenting the different user needs in a context-specific case would also be a sort of categorization. So what are the good cases on this, and how do we work about it?" And if I should add my own thought, is these signs to me also, they have different functions. So one is to say this is for whom, but it's also a bit of a priority issue. So it's for me to know I don't use a wheelchair, but it's simply saying, okay, there are plenty of restrooms available for people without need of a wheelchair. So go there, and then there is something, just the one restroom for the people who need the wheelchair. They have priority. So just thoughts on this all around the board, and yep. Will you start, Per-Olof?
Yeah, it's a very good. It's a very good question, and it is sort of where we are right now. We are halfway through the project, and we have started seeing this. As I said, we've started to pick up vibrations, sense of something happening, but we haven't. We have a lot. It's just a starting point, but I think it's to categorize is deeply human. When a child grows up, they often they quite soon learn what a lamp and a lamp is a lamp, and then a bit later they learn that the sun isn't a lamp. It's not part of that category. So we need things. We need categories to think. And that's deeply human. So what we are trying to find out if there are other ways to categorize that doesn't create environments with a feeling of us and them, with a predefined us and a predefined them, that doesn't come with the feeling of being included by someone, that but more as Louise says here, a variation based, that from universal design, from the very start, the notion of behind universal design has always been that there's only one population. There's not a normal population and the ones deviating from that. There's only one population, and within that there are a glorious number of of variations.
Any other thoughts from Kirsti and Camilla on this, or we can move to other topics as well?
I'll just send a thought that I've been carrying for a while. We have a lot of categories and all different arenas. And somewhere along the way, we have begun, or we've always thought that disabled people is a bad category that we need to get out of somehow. And signs that mark disability is bad, and we need to get out of that. And there has been some interesting research recently, like crip culture and cripability and disability pride and so on. So I think that we need to design for the entire bell curve, but we shouldn't talk down certain categories of disabled people. For example, there's nothing abnormal or bad in adhering to the disability minority, and that's not the point. The point is just to not turn anyone away with how you welcome people in. So, for example, if you have some people think that the disability sign that is now is excluding the other types of disabled people, for example. So that's something to work on. But I don't think the point is to assimilate the minority of disabled people into the population. It's just to design for the entirety of the population and not just the middle 50%. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
It does to me. Thank you. Camilla, do you have any thoughts, further thoughts on this, or places you would like to take the discussion?
Yeah, I'll just add to what the others said, that I also think that categorization is important tool and a necessary tool in a very, very complex world. I think that the the problem of categorization arises when we only look at one element. So, and that is sort of historically, culturally, at least in the Danish context, the way that we perceive people with disabilities. So it's only the wheelchair or the disability that we see when we categorize, and we don't see the whole person. So it's not necessarily that categorization in itself is a problem, but it's the way that we need to challenge each other to see all the complexity behind the categorizations. And this is why the intersectionality or disability studies or ableism and other sort of current research topics and really interesting aspects of the disability world is very important and kind of also offers us a potential. I think, again, in the Danish context, that the categorization has become a very simple tool of building requirements, where living with a disability has been sort of simplified into a width of a doorway or the slope of a ramp, and the rest of the person sitting in the wheelchair is lost. So I think that's really the aspect. This is where we need to challenge each other. So the categorization in itself is not a problem, but it's the way we work with them and approach them.
May I ask you, Camilla, also about your catalog of solutions that you've talked about? Have you made any sort of categorization of different types of situations? For example, the one we discussed just before with restrooms, that's one type of situation where there may be a conflict of interest, shall we say, of access. Yeah. There's just one restroom that should be used by one person, maybe a helper also at a time. Whereas the example that you mentioned of the public space having access to a public discussion, that's a different kind of situation. So have you in your work with this catalog of solutions looked at these different kinds of scenarios and the types of solutions needed, the conflicts involved?
Not in a sort of specific research project, but in our sort of regular case collection. And I think, sticking with the bathrooms, I think that the one example of how what we mean when we say a catalog of solutions is the bathroom or the toilet solution in the Danish disabled organization's headquarters in Høje-Taastrup, just outside of Copenhagen. And we point to that because when they designed and built the headquarters, they were gathering around 30 different disability organizations under one roof. So it was a sort of a one-to-one example of how to accommodate for a very high diversity of abilities within the user group. So instead of designing one type of bathroom or maybe two to accommodate for this high diversity, the architects went with designing 7 different bathrooms for this building. Because some people transfer from the left and some for the right, and some are visually impaired and need narrow spaces, and some need a lot of extra equipment, and so because we are so different, we have very different needs. And a wheelchair user might have a different way of using a bathroom than the other wheelchair user. That's back to the challenging the categorization, that it's all about the person sitting in the wheelchair and not the wheelchair itself. So the way that they've designed 7 different bathrooms in this one office building is, to us, a really good example of saying that it's not one bathroom that becomes the universal an example of universal design in the bathroom. It's the catalog. It's the 7 bathrooms together that make up for a universal design solution, because diversity in user needs require diversity in solutions. So that's an example.
Thank you very much. Kirsti, I want to ask you then, well, what does this look like from this a government perspective? Already, as you presented it, it's a very complex task. But if you are to set targets and set guidelines for how to build, how to design, how to provide access, regarding having a catalog of solutions of different kinds, what does it look like from a government perspective?
I really think the catalog perspective is an interesting one, because inherently universal designing something for as many people as possible would be a compromise across all people, right? So it wouldn't be the optimal solution for anyone. So I think that the catalog perspective is very interesting. Now in Norway, we have minimal requirements for universal design. And as a government agency, we, of course, work towards having everyone comply with those minimal requirements, but at the same time, try to pull everyone a little bit up from that and give them a broader perspective. Because the goal is, previously, we've had a lot of end targets, like all schools in Norway should be universally designed by 2030. But then what, right? Should we stop working on universal design after 2030? And what about all those who have what was I saying in English? Excessive burdens, that it's too expensive to work on universal design, or the building is too old, or there's safety requirements that makes us unable to fulfill even the minimal requirements. What then? So I think that we need to stop talking about end points of time when things should be universally designed, and just start where we're at and work iterative on it. Universal design is something that we should work on all the time and try to continuously be better and be open for input. Perhaps it's technological advancements that makes us able to accommodate even more people, or perhaps we need more knowledge about the needs of people, but we should have some way for information to get in and be used to further universal design continuously. So if it's something that we work on all the time, it should be better as well all the time. And the minimal requirements in law is not the golden standard, but the golden standard keeps moving ahead, and we should be open to that. So I think that we work with the law as a bottom point, and then we aim higher all the time.
Thank you very much, Kirsti. Per-Olof, do you have any further thoughts or responses to Camilla and Kirsti and to the questioner?
Yeah, first of all, I think the whole, as both Kirsti and Camilla said, it shows the mixture of interpretations and ways to approach the concept. I think that Kirsti, it was really helpful for me to the way you put that universal design is both a principle and a material requirement. And I think that's where there's a difference between Sweden and Norway, at least if we look at the different concepts where we use accessibility for the material requirements instead. But if we take a variation perspective or a humanity perspective, we still need to cover the same aspects of. We still need to know the same things. So it's just the words we use, not really the areas or the areas we cover. But and in what way? I was wondering in what way what role does the term accessibility play in Norway? Then maybe can you get rid of it altogether, or where are you heading with this?
Oh, that's a huge argument in Norway. Some people see it as the level before universal design, but I don't think that necessarily is appropriate. I think accessibility is a great term to use on an individual basis, because it doesn't make sense to say that something is universally designed for me, for example. I can say that I experience this as accessible, like this is accessible for me. So I think it works at an individual level, and in order to assess if something is accessible for a certain group, for instance, like we have aspired for universal design at this building, how accessible is it for blind people, for instance? So then it makes sense. So it makes sense as a subjective term, but that's how I feel. But I know that the argument in Norway has been that accessibility, the consensus earlier in Norway has been that accessibility is a stepping stone to universal design in a way. But at the same time, in the law, it states also that universal design, the goal of universal design is equal accessibility. So then you have the full circle in a way, if you, yeah. So, but it's a continuous argument in Norway.
Thank you very much, Kirsti. I think we are going running full circle, or at least out of time for today's webinar. Any last thoughts, Camilla or Per-Olof, before we round up? We just have 1 minute to go.
Can I just ask a brief question to Camilla? You were very explicit about intersectionality and the importance of intersectionality. And so, where are you heading with that? Because that's something that all three of us touched upon.
Well, that's maybe a longer answer, but we'll continue the conversation. But I think that it is also because we want to challenge this notion of disability being its own category, but insisting on, so when discussing our blind spots, that disability also exists in all other identities and categorizations. So this is how we try to sort of open the intersectionality sort of approach or understanding here in Denmark. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, I think we'll just have to round up and say thank you very much, everybody, for participating in the silence out there. But it was a great joy for us to organize this event. Thank you very much, Kirsti, Camilla, and Per-Olof, for great presentations. For you attendees, if you want to share this event with somebody else, you can. In a few days, we'll put it on the web. So we have a recording along with these text translations. So they should be accessible to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people should make use of that access. So thank you very much for joining. And it's been wonderful. Have a nice afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.